Hi, this is Bernard from English OTP, and today I'm going to bring you another video on crooked letter, and it's going to be a very important one because today we're going to talk about the plot. And so in this video you will find a repetition of what happens in the novel on a large scale. Of course, we won't be talking about each single incident that happens, like, small parts like the shooting of M&M, or who Von Sill is, things like that will not be in here, but of course we'll be talking about the big points in crooked letter. So let's jump right in. I think this can really help you to refresh your knowledge of crooked letter, of the plot, if you've maybe read it a year ago or half a year ago, or you just want to get those big actions back into your head before heading into an exam. So this is why we're going to have a look at the MacroPlot. First of all, I think it's important to understand what MacroPlot means if you want to use that term. And it's a combined form of macro, which means large, on a large scale. So you guys all know micro, which is really small. And then there's macro, which is really big. And plot is the plan or the main story. So it can be the main story of a movie or of a literary work. So again, it's not small details, it's the big plot, macro plot. Okay, so if we look for the macro plot, we have to ask ourselves which important actions happen. So which actions are most important for the overall plot, when do they happen, and why do they happen? Okay, so as I said, things on the side like the shooting of M&M, they're not really important for the outline of the whole novel. So I talked about this in an earlier video, and I'm gonna put a link in down in the description that you can click on when I talked about what really drives the plot in crooked letter. There's really two things. So the narrative on the whole revolves around the two stages of Larry and Silas's friendship, and those two stages in turn revolve around the two disappearances of Cindy and Tina. So this is really what drives the whole thing. So, we have the first setting in 1979, 1980, and we have the second setting in 2008. And we have the first stage of Silas and Larry's friendship. And the second stage, we have the first disappearance of Cindy and the second disappearance of Tina. So to understand the plot on a general level, this is what we'll be looking at. So we can say that the relationship timeline of Larry and Silas equals the plot timeline. And this is where we're going to jump right into that. So first thing we're going to have a look at is the relationship and plot timeline back then. That means in 1979, 1980. And I'm just, going to give you an overview of the most important points. You can go back, you can pause the video at any time, go back to the parts in the novel, maybe reread some of the excerpts that I have here of the quotes. That's up to you to do, but maybe this is enough to refresh your memory. So the first meeting was exactly in 1979. Where exactly? It's in Carl's car. So they first meet when Carl picks up Silas and Alice from the side of the road, and first, Silas doesn't talk to Larry at school. Well, he never really talks to Larry at school, even later. So they only talk in the car. And this sort of first contact is also disrupted after Ina finds out about Alice and Silas, and she gives them coats so they can walk to school, but they no longer ride in the car together. So this is the first part of contact, where Larry shows Silas some books and they get to speak a bit, and it's a regular thing, but that just stops. The next part is between April and July in 1979. That's when they become friends. So it's a sort of strange friendship because they seem to get along really well, but still Silas doesn't talk to Larry at school. So Larry and Silas meet in the woods. So Larry shows Silas how to shoot and lends him his rifle. And Larry also helps Silas catch reptiles. They do that together. They spend a lot of time together and they become friends. They meet on a regular basis. And then the summer vacation, just before the summer vacation in 1979, is when the firm friendship sort of starts to break up, and then it has an abrupt end. So first, Larry and Silas spend a lot of time together. They go fishing, shooting, and Larry tells Silas horror stories. So he really says that he enjoys listening to the horror stories. He doesn't want to read them on his own, but he enjoys when Larry tells him those stories. But they must keep their friendship secret, and this has to do with societal racism, because society as a whole, and Silas's mother in specific, we know about that, they don't want them to be friends. So, I mean, whether Silas's mother does not want Silas to be a friend with Larry because of race reasons or because of other reasons that you all know, because obviously she knows that they are half brothers, that's on a different page. But that's what the boys think, right? That there are race reasons for them not being allowed to mix. And also Larry accepts that Silas doesn't speak to him in school because it's not something that kids back then would have done. White kids would have stuck with white kids, and black kids would have stuck with black kids. And at some point, Silas starts to play baseball, and this seems to disrupt their friendship somewhat. So he goes to training more often, he meets Larry less often, and it is at this time that Larry decides that he's going to let Silas in on his secret that he's had only for himself up to now, but maybe this could save their friendship. So this is his plan, and he shows him that he's been spying on Cindy. So they creep up to Cindy's back garden, the Walker's back garden, where Cindy quite often sunbathes. And while they watch Cindy, Cecil, her father, and Carl, Larry's father, appear, and Cecil is not Cindy's father, he's her stepfather, right? And he starts to assault her, and Silas steps in, and this is, of course, very courageous of him, and you know, Larry's typically Larry, he's scared, he doesn't want to do anything, and this is already where the friendship starts to break up even more, because Larry's not happy with how Silas dealt with the situation. And well, the final nail in the coffin of their friendship obviously is the fight scene, which you can find on page 88 to page 91. Maybe reread that one, I think that one's really important. So the thing is, Carl has found out that Larry doesn't have one of the guns anymore, so Larry needs to give back the gun to Carl, but Silas refuses to give it back to him. And this is when Carl just appears out of nowhere, and he's drunk and upset about the Cindy episode, and he takes it out on the boys, right? So and he makes them fight over the gun. So they don't really want to fight each other, but Carl threatens to beat them up with a belt. And of course Silas is stronger, and he beats Larry pretty badly, and he doesn't let go when Larry begs him to let go. And this is when Larry uses the N-word. But he instantly regrets what he's done and what he's been brought to do, we can say. So you can go back to another video where I talk about responsibility, and where I talk about guilt and penance. This is something that comes up there. And so he instantly regrets it, but it's over. The friendship is completely over for Silas. This is a red line that Larry has crossed, and Silas is declared the winner by Carl, and Carl says you can keep the gun, and this is why Silas runs away with the rifle. And what happens after that is, we all know 1979, 1980, first of all they have complete no contact at school whatsoever. So Silas ignores Larry. Later on he will say he's just a hick that nobody liked. I think that's a good description of Larry and how he is seen by the other students, the white and the black students. And Silas does not reach out to Larry, even in the haunted house scene. Right? There's this scene where Larry is invited to go play sort of the zombie in the haunted house because he has this zombie mask, and this is sort of a very small moment where he gets some recognition. And this is also a part where Silas has the feeling that he could have reached out to him, but he decides not to. He decides to ignore them. And also, of course, the end of it is that Silas does not clear Larry after Cindy's disappearance. And in the aftermath, their ways separate also geographically. So Silas goes to study at Ole Miss, University of Alabama. Maybe you can check that out. And Larry enters the army to become a mechanic. So it's not only that they have no contact with each other anymore in Chabot, they actually go their separate ways, geographically isolated and separated. And so the next part of the story is nearly 30 years later, and that is 2008. It starts with the phone calls. So phone calls, page 28. Larry calls Silas multiple times when Silas returns to Chabot, and Silas feels uneasy and doesn't want to talk, and we know why. But I'm not sure if Silas knows why at that time. So Larry calls again, and he leaves a voicemail that has something very important, but he doesn't want to say it on the voicemail. He wants to speak to Silas, but Silas doesn't return his call. But he starts to think about their past. So this is where it starts. So he is uneasy already. There's something that he's not okay with when he hears Silas, when he hears Larry's voice. But this is only when he starts to think about the past. So, and then he realizes that he has an open debt. This is the next stage of their friendship. So in the wake of Tina's disappearance and Larry being shot, Silas wrestles with his memories and his guilt, and this is the first time where it comes up. So the first thing he does is he saves Larry's life by making Angie check on Larry after he's been shot. So he has a hunch, he says, which is not quite true. And the first admittance of their past friendship. So this is the first time in the whole novel, the beginning, 79 and 80 and 2008, where Silas actually admits that he was one of Larry's friends, or he was Larry's friend, and he admits that to Angie, his girlfriend. I talked a bit about the relationship to Angie in my previous video, which was on, what was it on? Friendship and belonging. Yeah, so maybe you can go back to that. So Angie is like this first really girlfriend that has a hold on Silas, and she's the first person ever whom he admits to that Larry was his friend. So, and he starts to care for Larry. So he reads Larry's book, he reads The Night Shift, he feeds his chickens, he admits his friendship to Mrs. Ott when he visits her in the home, and he has a lot of memories of their time together come back to him, and he admits that he enjoyed this time. Okay, so this is where the change starts to happen more and more. And finally, he realizes the consequences of his deed. I mean, maybe he has realized them before, but this is the first time that he admits them. So, because he's wondering what you felt when you learned you've been robbed of 25 years of life. So, when he thinks about Silas, Larry, and about telling him that he had seen Cindy after Larry had left her, this is what he thinks about. What would you feel when you just learn that you've been robbed of 25 years of your life? And another really central quote that I would like you to go back to and read, and maybe just read what is around it, is that the other police guy says, Odd never did no time, right? So you don't have to feel bad about it, because Larry's never been in prison, right? So, and Silas says, well, he's done time his whole life. And he realizes that he's to blame. Larry is completely socially isolated. He's ostracized. No one goes to his garage. No one speaks to him. He's stigmatized. So, and Silas knows that this is because of what he did or what he didn't do. And he says it's like prison. He's been doing time. He's been basically he's been in prison for his whole life. And this is also where this realization comes from. And again, maybe you can go back to the other video of Friendship and Belonging that says where And Larry asks Silas, we were friends, weren't we, Silas? And he says, you were, Larry, you were a friend to me. I don't know what I was, but I was the friend. Okay, so by this time in the novel, Silas has understood what he's done and he hates himself for it. So he admits seeing Cindy all those years ago, and when Larry hears that he had seen Cindy, but he has never admitted to it, the friendship, the bond of friendship that he still has for Silas, but Silas didn't have for him, this is when it breaks, right? So Silas tells the police, Larry is there, that he saw Cindy, that he was Cindy's boyfriend, and so this of course clears Larry, and this makes Larry say, I don't know what to think, or even if I'm still sorry for insulting him all those years back in the woods, calling him the N-word. And Larry completely stops speaking to Silas, right? So we've had this bond, this affinity, and again, I talk about that in the video before, what affinity, what belonging and affinity have to do with each other. We've had this affinity of Larry towards Silas all those years. It has never completely stopped, but now it does. And this is just when this affinity of Silas towards Larry is growing again. So what does Silas do? Well, he tries to make everything right. He tries to reach penance and redemption, and he investigates into the shooting and Tina's disappearance in order to clear Larry. When he's put into hospital, he wants to share the room with Larry, but the funny thing is, of course, that Larry wants to be moved. He does not want to be in the same room with him. He visits Larry in hospital every day. He stops taking painkillers. Maybe you can go back to the video on guilt and penance. I talk about that there. He cleans Larry's house, he cleans Larry's rifle, and he returns Larry's rifle to the house. So he does everything he can to undo what he's done, which is of course impossible, but he cannot do more now than he's doing. So in the end, when Larry leaves the hospital at night, Silas picks him up and drives him home, and the two half-brothers agree to meet the next day so Larry can repair Silas' car. This is of course a fantastic end because it promises a lot. Silas is going to be Larry's first customer. Okay, and so this is how the novel wraps it up. And it's a bit open. Talked about that in another video. It's up to you to maybe think, is it a good end? Is it a happy end? I would say it is. Do you think the friendship can hold? It's up to you. But I think this is a good recap. Again, go back to some of the key scenes that you can find in this video and reread them. I think that would be really helpful for you in the exams, whether it's an oral exam or a written exam or just discussing the book. And if you have questions, put them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And that's it for today.